And I'm going to hit the big button that says start. And I think we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Charles Sterling. I work on the PowerApps team, and I'm here today with one of my favoriteest MVPs. I think I started listening to you, watching you, met you, because you were listening to Pink Floyd in one of your YouTube videos. Does that sound about right, Ike?
Sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm even wearing my Pink Floyd shirt today. So this is actually the very first in a series of blog posts and webinars by MVPs going out and showing off some of what they're doing in the industry. And the first one, I did not cajole the topic. I didn't actually favor anybody. Happened to be on the integration of Power BI and Power Apps. Happens to be one of my favoriteest topics. So again, just by coincidence that we got Ike in one of my favoriteest topics. So that's pretty cool. So on that topic, Ike, what was the blog post you did for us? And are you going to walk through it for us today? Are you going to show us how to do that?
Yep, I'm going to walk you through it right now. So just to kind of show you what the idea is behind the blog post, I had a customer say that they wanted a Power BI report and they wanted it to be updatable, meaning they wanted to be able to type into a data entry field and see their reports update in real time. And this is actually a really common request. And for a very long time, the answer to that question was, well, since Power BI can pull data from anywhere, from any database, then what we need is to write an application against that database so that when somebody updates in the application, it updates the database and then Power BI report gets updated. And the problem with that answer, even though that's a perfectly good answer and plenty of people do that, the problem with that answer is that it requires people who know software development. And that software development requirement is a huge barrier to entry for a lot of organizations. Like software developers are expensive, they're hard to find, and they're hard to manage. And you have to have kind of an apparatus of giving them everything that they ask for in order to get the work done. So we had a customer, a very large customer. They're an RV dealer. And if you ever see like RV dealerships, we can just kind of search that real quick. You'll see that these things are huge lots. They're gigantic. Like this is a good example of an RV dealership over here, right?
And, I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever heard the word or seen the word humongous in a blog post before. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
humongously
exactly.
Large, I think, is actually the term used. But go ahead.
Right. And so these RV dealers, these lots are extraordinarily difficult to cover in Wi-Fi. And so for this customer, they had salespeople and they were tracking salespeople's total sales, which is a very common thing to do, right? Who are my top salespeople? How much did they sell this month? What are they doing, right? And what they wanted is they wanted the salespeople to have the first shot at creating their own monthly goals. So a salesman would be kind of thinking about his month and say, you know what, I'm going to sell this much money or this many units or whatever they were going to sell. And then those goals would get, in an app, they would get updated and then it would get saved to a database. And then in a Power BI report, you would see those goals show up in the report, right? And Power Apps was a perfect solution for this because one, Power Apps doesn't require a developer to write an application. Two, these salespeople don't necessarily have computers. They all have phones and tablets, but they didn't have computers. Three, because these lots were so large, we couldn't use Wi-Fi internally for the company. We had to use the cell network. And because Power Apps has the gateway service, we can hit internal and cloud databases from the cell network, from the mobile network, to internal resources that might be on their own private network. So all of these things combined made Power Apps really, really compelling to the customer. And this is something I kind of wanted to emphasize about Power Apps and about Power BI is if you compared Power BI to any of its competitors, you would see a lot of people compare things that I think are relatively trivial, right? Like, oh, this visualization is different or the way we do data prep is different. But I think the main competitive advantage is that Power BI integrates with Power Apps and Power Apps integrates right back. And they both integrate with all of this enormous amount of Azure and cloud services. And so when you talk about the integration story and the integration story with Office 365 and with SharePoint, that it makes a product that nobody else really has, that you can create solutions that nobody else can create. And so in this solution that we made for the RV dealership, we're going to use an Azure SQL database. We're going to use PowerApps, and we're going to use Power BI so that the salespeople can enter their own goals. And as they enter them, when the Power BI report refreshes, it gets updated immediately, right? So and I should use the word immediately loosely because we're going to use Power BI Desktop, but you'll get the general idea, okay? The first thing that we should kind of take a look at is Azure. And I know a lot of people that might use Power Apps or Power BI might not be super familiar or comfortable with Azure, but Azure is Microsoft's cloud service, and there's so many different things that you can do with Azure. Like, look at this list. And even if you click on databases and look at all the different databases that you can create, right? And so one of the great things about Azure is if you wanted a SQL database, it will say, oh, do you want like an Azure SQL DB? Yes, I do. Okay, yep, let's go ahead and create it. You say, okay, we want a SQL database, click create. And you could just fill in this page, like name your database, choose how large you want the database to be, and a couple different settings about username and password and whether or not you want an HADR story, whether you want a secondary database for failover in a different region. You know, you answer these questions, and 5 minutes later, you get a database. I'm not going to do this right now because it takes 5 minutes and that's a boring webinar if we do that. But I've already got one created and I called mine Sales DB. So if I go in and I go into my Azure SQL Server and I go down to databases, you can see that I've got this Sales DB database here all ready to go. And this database has tables in it. And I should have used Azure Data Explorer because that's a cool tool and it's what I use in the blog post, but I just used SSMS for this right now. And what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a couple tables. Here's a salesperson table, and I'm creating a couple of salespeople I'm inserting, and then a sales table, and I'm just mocking this up and simplifying it, where we're keeping track of orders and a sale amount, and then goals for the user, for the salesperson. So this particular salesperson that's related to the salespeople table has a month and a year and then their goal amount. And then I'm just inserting a bunch of dummy records. So it's pretty easy. It's in the blog post. You can copy and paste that into your favorite SQL Server tool. And then it worked. And just to prove that it kind of worked, if we go into a new query and we say select star from sales, right? You can see that there's a bunch of sales here with sales amounts and they're assigned to salespeople, right? So if we do select star, from salespeople, there we go. You can see that our salespeople are there. Now, what you'll also notice is we have no goals. Isn't that sad? Aren't we all a little bit overweight? Nope, no goals. Okay, so we're going to create a PowerApps application, and it's going to allow the salespeople on their phones to enter their own goals, and we're going to see that automatically get updated in a Power BI report. So the way now that we've got this database and now that we've got it seeded, let's create the PowerApps application. So if I go back to PowerApps, a lot of people who make PowerApps, actually, let's go back. Yeah, that's the right screen. Okay. And we'll click create. And then we're just going to create a Canvas app from a blank. And we're going to make sure that we have the phone layout, right? And we'll just call it Enter Sales Goals for Chuck.
Yay for Chuck!
Yep. Actually, if you look at my dummy data, you'll see Sterling, whatever. You're in there. Okay. So PowerApps comes up. We get a blank app. Okay. The very first thing that you do in PowerApps is you need to connect to a database. So what we're going to do is click over here to data sources. We're going to click SQL Server, and then it says, okay, you want a SQL Server. Anytime you connect to a SQL Server in anything, doesn't matter if it's PowerApps or Power BI or some application or Excel, you always have to put in your server name, database name, username, and password. And so the way we do that is we go back here and we grab that as the server name, and then we know that the database name is SalesDB, right? And then we put in my name, and then we put in my password, and actually, hang on, is that the right password? Yeah, click create. Go.
Come on, PowerApps, feel your
Come on,
wings.
you can do it.
We can do it. You know, this is the problem that I asked Ike to do a live sign in. You know what the problem happened is I was had you playing with that other account. Oh, there it goes.
Oh,
It's working.
there we go. Okay, yeah, that is the problem. You are right. That is the problem. You messed me up. Okay.
I messed you up.
You did. Well, hopefully this will still work. We'll still be fine. So if I click the tables that I want here, I only have 3. Actually, I don't even need the sales table. I only need goals and salespeople, and I click connect. And now there's goals, there's salespeople. Okay, they're all ready to rock and roll. Okay, so we're just going to create a really simple app. So what I'm going to do is just if I click on insert and do a label, what we like is to see some type of header here, and just in the interest of time. No, that's okay. Hang on. So here under the text field, we just want to write enter a goal amount for the month, and that might not look really pretty, but you get the idea. Okay, then we're going to have a label, and we're going to have some inputs here. So like we know that one input is going to be goal month, right? And then we'll just copy. Actually, what would be nice is if so in dealing with Power Apps, one cool thing that you can always do is go to advanced and search for something. So if I want to know like something about fonts, I just click font, and you can see that the weight can be bold, right? Yeah. No, hey. There we go. All right. So I'm going to delete this, and then we'll just copy this a couple times. We have a couple bold. So we know we want goal month. We know we want goal year. We know we want salesperson. So this is salesperson. Make that a little wider. We know we want goal amount, right? Dollars. And then we know we want a button, right? So we could put a button. And this button we know is going to save something. So it's good in the text here to say, hey, save it, right? Okay. Now, what are we going to do? We want drop-down lists. So in goal month, we're just going to go into controls and do a drop-down list. And then this is going to be the drop-down for goal month. And then we know we're going to want to drop down for a goal year. And then we know we're going to want to drop down for a salesperson. And then we know we're going to want a text box to input, oops, no, not that one, to input the goal amount. Okay. Now, it's really helpful in Power Apps if you start naming these controls. So the way we name controls is if you click here and then over in the tree view, you'll see that when the control is highlighted, it's highlighted over here. So if we go over here, we can just rename it. We can say DDL. This is called Hungarian notation. It's not a Power Apps best practice. It's just something when I was a brand new developer many years ago, because I'm super old. You just they teach you to do. But it just, that way in code, if I see this object, I know DDL is drop-down list, right? So if I am looking at some kind of expression that I'm creating, I know what it is, right? So DDL I use for drop-down list, and TXT is what I use for text box, for an input like that. And then you can imagine that the button is BTN, right? So maybe and this helps me with navigation, so I know where I am in the application at all times, right? Okay, so with the goal month, I don't know if you knew this, but in Alt, you hold Alt down, you can see that it has some dummy data here, 1, 2, 3, right? But what we want is an expression here that will give us all the months available. And I put that in the blog post for you, so you don't have to write this down, but it looks like this. And what we're doing with goal month is we're saying in the database, we want a numeric value because that's good database practice. Right? But for the user, we want a text value, January, February, March, April, right? So we use the table function in order to do that. So this table function is what's creating this key value pair for me, right? And now for year, maybe I want goals for 2018 and 2019 and 2020. So for the items there, what we do is we just need to use an array. We don't need the table expression anymore. And if I hold down the Alt key, you can see, hey, it works. There's all the months. And there's the goal year. Now, salesperson is a little bit different. So salesperson, we are actually pulling this from the database. So when we want to pull something from the database, we say items, please pull it from salesperson. And it just automatically creates this for salesperson name. And you can see it that easy. This is pulling out of the database that you saw me create in Azure SQL database, and you saw me create that table. Boom, it's that easy. So now for text input, we don't actually want to see text input. We want to clear it, right? Set it's empty so that the user knows they have to put something in there. And now the only complicated thing, and it's really not even that complicated, is in the save button here, we need to, when the user selects it, we need to put in some code. And so what this code does is it says, if you go into the goals table and for salesperson ID and month and year, you find a record, delete that record. So delete a record if it exists for with these three criteria, and then add a new goal amount based on the TXT goal amount. Do you see how that Hungarian notation helps me navigate the code when I'm in this big screen like this? Like I know these drop-down lists and TXTs, what I'm feeding into. I'm using the value function to change data types from a text to a numeric where it's necessary. Okay, so now that I've got that, why are you choking? There's no reason to choke. Oh, you know why it's choking? It's just to make sure that DDL goal year is named correctly. So I think I named it incorrectly. And that's a good thing. So notice how it said the function value has an invalid argument. And when I looked at it, it told me exactly, you know, what was invalid. Something's wrong here. It couldn't find that thing, right? So if I go back to year, I actually need to change that to goal year. Dude, all right. See the red X went away? And now what we can do is we can either interact with this right here, or we can just hit this play button. And this is simulating what the user would see on the phone. And so if for Sterling, I put in a goal of 500 for January 2019, and I click save, if I go back to SSMS where we had empty goals before and I execute, there's the goal. It's really that quick. And PowerApps makes this really, really easy and simple. Okay, now let's tie it all. Do you have anything you want to say, Chuck?
No. I tapped my headset. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
That is totally fine. Okay, so here is Power BI Desktop coming up. And we're just going to create a real simple Power BI report, but we're going to have to massage the data a little bit. And I think that's okay. I contemplated pre-baking the turkey here and making it so we didn't have to massage any data, but that's not realistic, right? I mean, the data is never going to be in a way that you want it to be for reporting, right? So here's Power BI Desktop. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. You see a blank report?
Yes,
yep.
I do.
Oh, great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull data from a SQL database. Which SQL database? Well, it's the same four things that we had to do with Power Apps, right? So if I go back to Azure, it's this server name, right? And we know the database is SalesDB. We'll use import for now because it's no big thing. We'll click OK. And oh, look, it authenticated me automatically. So now I've got goals, sales, and salespeople. So it saved the connection from a previous session. So I didn't have to enter my username and password. But if the prompt comes up, remember to click the database tab and put in your username and password to get to an Azure SQL database. Okay, so when I click load, it takes a second, but it's not that long. It loads those tables up. And now what you'll find when we click on the relationship, actually, when we click on the data, if we look at the goal, it's done by month and by year. And if we look at sales, it's done by an order date. And that is not great because that means that ideally what you would want is you would want goals and sales to be joined on 3 different columns. Basically, in goal, you would want it joined by month, year, and goal and salesperson ID, pardon me, month, year, and salesperson ID. And for sales, you'd want it joined by the year of the order date, the month of the order date, and the salesperson ID, right? And the reason why you're joining it on those 3 criteria is you want to be able to compare the sale amount with the goal for a given salesperson and a given month and year, right? So in order for that to work, and let me hang on one second, let me just drag this to another screen. In order for that to work, we need to create some custom columns. And so if we go on the goal table, goal table, And we just right click and we say new column. We need to add a little bit of DAX here. Boop. And we're going to create a column called join key. And what join key does is it says, give me a string version of month. Hey. Give me a string version of month, a string version of year, and concatenate the salesperson ID. So when we do that, we get, January 2019 for salesperson 1 here. And we're going to do something similar for the sales table. So when we click on the sales table, and we have another join key for sales. And that expression is very similar. It's in the blog post, so you don't have to worry about it writing this or writing this down. But we name it join key again, a string version of the month for the order date, a string version for the year of the order date, and we concatenate the salesperson ID again. So when we click enter, say July 2019, salesperson 1, salesperson 2, salesperson 3, right? So we've got some good data in there. Now the next step for data preparation is we go to our model and we verify that the relationships between those tables are right, and they're not. They're based on a column that's named the same, but doesn't have the same data. So if we click on join key and make the cross-filter direction both and click OK, that relationship is good. Let's verify the relationship between sales and salespeople. And that is done on this column, and we click OK. And now the relationship is good. And now what that allows us to do is create the visualization in the report. So if we go ahead and we add a clustered bar chart here, maybe that's the one we want, and we say, okay, what on this axis, what do we want? We want goal amount, and we want sale amount. Yep. And then we wanted that by, maybe we want that by salesperson name. Oh, excuse me, that's not the axis. We want it for value. What am I doing, Ike? Dude, Chuck, you didn't stop me.
Oh, no, sorry.
Then we'll go to axis, and then we'll do that for like goal month, and we'll do it for goal year. Okay. Now, what you're seeing here is that for the sales that we have in July, we don't have any goals yet. So you can imagine if you were in PowerApps, you could say, hey, for July 2019 for Sterling, we want a goal of 1,500. And then we'll just say for Rick, we want a goal of like 1,900, and we'll save that. And then for Morty, we want a goal of 1,799, or we'll make his goal really big, 3,000. Okay, and we'll click
Morty,
save.
he's an animal, isn't he?
He's an animal. Yeah, we expect big things from him. When we go back to the report that we made and we click refresh, the data refreshes, and now we can see those goals, see the goal amounts, light blue. Yep, updated, right? So look, we did this in 23 minutes by my clock. Does that look too hard for anybody to learn to do? Like, you can create a mobile app, and you could publish it, and boom, they get it on their phones a minute later, right? And now they look in their app on their phone and they're entering their goals. Now, there are a few changes that we would make if we wanted to have a production app, in my opinion, okay? The first change, and I didn't add this because we didn't want to be here all day, right? The first change is the app itself. We don't need the salesperson to select themselves because PowerApps are shared by an email address, and you can gain access to that email address using a PowerApps function. And so when the user logs in, we know who they are. All they have to do is say, my goal amount's 3,000 for this month, and boom, it's done. So that's one thing that we should change that would make this a little bit better. We would also, in the PowerApps, we should have a way that lets them look at their old goals and modify them or delete them if they have a data input problem, or a little report embedded in here might be really helpful. Another thing that we would change is we usually, in apps like this, you want an audit log. So if you're allowing goals to be changed, you would want kind of modified date and modified person or modified by here in the table so that you knew who changed that goal. And that way, it just prevents someone from saying, that wasn't my goal, or I don't know who did that, or I don't know what happened there. And then the other thing that we did in production for the real customer is our Power App actually used Flow to create an approval process. So when a salesperson added a goal, a manager got emailed that, hey, a salesperson added a new goal, and that manager could go into their Power App and approve or deny that goal. If they approved it, it made it into the final report. If they denied it, it kicked back an email to the original salesperson that told them they messed up and they needed a better goal, right? So these are just some recommendations of things that might make this a little bit more professional, but I think you get the general idea on what's possible here. And I hope that helps many of you who get asked this really common thing, right? How do I make this dashboard or report updatable?
That is great. You know, there were a lot of questions, and the one question that we did get, let's see, did their name come through? No, anonymous. I don't know if that's Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous. They asked, how do I make my Power BI reports or my Power Apps, and this is specific to Power Apps, so what they were asking about, available to people outside my organization? That was the only question we got, and I don't know if you wanted to take a run at it, and I will add my 2 cents, or did you want me to just take it? So
yeah, take it, Chuck. Yeah.
That was the only question I got. Okay, so when we talk about people outside my organization, we're talking 2 types of those people, right? So there are named individuals who I know, like Ike. Ike is a great example. I know Ike's email address, and I would want to go out and invite him specifically. And what you're doing is actually you're adding him as a guest in my tenant. So I'm actually adding a pointer from my organization back into his organization. He gets an invitation and he accepts it. And he can actually, that metaphor works for both Power BI and Power Apps. So I can share my content with him from either of those 2 worlds. So everything that we showed, I could actually go out and share with Ike. Now, what's the other type? Ike, so that's one type of sharing. Who's the other type of sharing that you might talk about in the worlds of people outside my organization?
Maybe I've got like a PowerApps public app where I'm collecting survey information.
Right. Exactly right. People I don't know, right? I know Ike. What happens about the other? What are we up to? 9 billion people on this planet that I don't know. I only know Ike. And Power Apps, the way that Ike was just showing it, it needs a different metaphor. When he goes into right now, if you could actually center your sharing right now, can you go back into PowerApps.com and do File New Application? Perfect. Actually, how about apps? Is it File New Creation? I think it's actually.
Oh yeah. Yep. So
because you get 4 tiles, and one of those is a tablet app, and one of those is a. I should probably know my own UI better.
Where is it?
I think it's. We're in the Maker Studio already. I think what we need to do is just go to PowerApps.com.
Oh yeah, you're right. Totally right here. Yep. Create.
And there it is. There it is. There it is. And you'll see that there is one called PowerApps Portals. It's the. Is there even one there? Oh, it's supposed to be coming. Oh, there it is. So that one, thank you, Ike, is actually meant for anonymous users. I can go out and let literally the whole planet use this version. Matter of fact, if you want an example of that, you can go to ideas.dynamics.com. And Ike, if you're in a new tab, if you could go to ideas.dynamics.com, you'll actually see that type of application running. That was actually written using those portals paradigms. I probably just made up the wrong URL, and we're going to go to someplace naughty that we shouldn't be. There you go. So this is an example that the whole planet uses, and it uses that PowerApps portals. So again, a very, very long-winded answer. There are 2 types of sharing. One is I'm going to share with named people. That adds them as guests in my tenant, and the other one is anonymous, and you're going to need to use the PowerApps portals. Otherwise, you just go out and invite them. When you go to sharing in any of your apps, I can type in anybody else's address, and they get an invitation. So Seth says, Mr. Anonymous, apparently my new nickname, or I've forgotten my given name is Seth. Oh, okay. So it was Seth, and I don't know if this is Seth Bauer, my MVP, or a different Seth, but Seth, thank you for joining. But that's our last question. So what else did you want to cover in the last couple of minutes? It sounds like I'm going to be down in San Diego, where Ike runs the local PowerApps Power BI user group, and we're actually going to go out and cover the whole updatable pieces, but things that are coming and things that are actually around it. So we actually did this as a side-by-side app. How do I put them together? Or actually, how do I put this inside of PowerApps itself? So I will be covering that in San Diego. We're going to figure it out, but right now we're looking at the first week in December. Does that sound about right, Ike?
That does sound right. Yep.
And if you haven't joined your local user group, please go out and do that. These guys work their butts off to make this content available to you. Yeah, so Seth Bauer, my homie. Okay, so Seth is Wisconsin. He is actually a user group leader. He does amazing Power Apps, and he's a Power BI wizard. So if you live in the Midwest and you haven't joined your user group, please do actually take a look at Mike Harlow and Seth Bauer's user group. Again, two of the very best in the industry. So with that, Ike, I want to thank you for the amazing walkthrough. I'll make sure, actually, I think the walkthrough is already in the video link. And what we're going to do is as soon as I finish End, I'm actually going to upload that video into YouTube. So it'll actually show up in the gallery and on YouTube itself. Anything else for you? Otherwise, I'll let you close.
No, thanks, Chuck. It's been great. Thanks for asking me to do this. I had a great time.
All right. Thanks, guys. You have an amazing day. And thank you, Ike.